The noose tightened around Sarah Flores's neck as the crowd below bayed for her blood. Her feet dangled inches above the wooden platform, the rough hemp rope burning against her skin. The autumn wind whipped through the valley, carrying the scent of pine and the bitter taste of injustice. Her vision blurred as oxygen fled her lungs, but through the haze she saw him. Ryan Collins stood at the edge of the crowd, his weathered face a mask of controlled fury, his hand resting on the knife at his belt. The mountain man who had lived as an outcast for 15 years was about to make a choice that would change everything. The rope went slack. Sarah crashed to the platform, gasping and clawing at her throat as chaos erupted around her. Ryan's blade had found its mark, severing the hanging rope with surgical precision. Sheriff Timothy Brooks raised his rifle, but Ryan was already moving, his massive frame cutting through the crowd like a bear protecting its territory. "If she sinned," Ryan bellowed over the screaming mob, "then I am sinning too." His voice carried the authority of a man who had faced down wolves and survived winters that killed lesser souls. "Take me instead, or take us both. But this ends now." But to understand how Sarah Flores came to stand on that gallows and why Ryan Collins risked everything to save her, we must go back 6 months earlier to a spring morning when desperation drove a widow into the unforgiving wilderness of the Colorado Territory. Sarah had been walking for 3 days when she first saw smoke rising from the valley below. Her worn boots had given out miles ago, leaving her feet bloody and blistered. The canvas bag containing her few possessions felt like it weighed 100 pounds, though it held nothing more than a change of clothes, a tin cup, and the last of her dried corn. Her husband, Aaron Morris, had been dead 4 months, killed in a mining accident that left her with nothing but debts and the cruel whispers of neighbors who blamed her for his drinking. The smoke meant civilization, or at least another human being. Sarah stumbled down the rocky slope, her legs trembling with exhaustion and hunger. She had been surviving on wild berries and stream water, but winter's grip had been long this year, and edible plants were scarce. The cabin materialized through the pine trees like something from a fever dream. It was larger than she had expected, built from massive logs that spoke of both skill and permanence. Smoke curled from a stone chimney, and she could see a garden plot that had been recently turned. A man emerged from behind the structure, carrying an armload of split wood. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell past his collar and a beard that had seen many seasons. When he spotted her, he froze. Sarah tried to speak, but only a croak emerged from her parched throat. She swayed on her feet, the world tilting dangerously. The man dropped his wood and rushed forward, catching her just as her knees buckled. "Easy now," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "When did you last eat?" Sarah couldn't remember. She managed to whisper, "Water." He lifted her as if she weighed nothing, carrying her toward the cabin. The scent of cooking meat drifted from the open door, and Sarah's stomach cramped with desperate hunger. He settled her on a rough wooden chair near the fire and pressed a cup of cool water into her hands. "Small sips," he instructed. "Too much too fast will make you sick." As Sarah drank, she studied her rescuer. His face was weathered by years of mountain living, with lines around his eyes that spoke of squinting into sun and snow. His clothes were well made but practical, leather and wool designed for durability rather than fashion. Most striking were his eyes, a pale blue that seemed to see everything while revealing nothing. "I am Ryan Collins," he said, ladling stew from a pot hanging over the fire. "What brings a woman alone into these mountains?" "My name is Sarah Flores," she managed between careful sips of water. "My husband died in the mines. I lost our home. I was trying to reach my sister in Denver, but I got lost." Ryan nodded without judgment, filling a wooden bowl with thick stew. "Denver is still 60 miles north," he said. "These mountains will kill you if you do not know their ways." He handed her the bowl and a carved wooden spoon. Sarah forced herself to take small bites, savoring the rich broth and tender meat. It was the best thing she had tasted in months. "You can stay until you recover your strength," Ryan said, "but I should warn you, I am not welcome in the settlements. People tell stories about me that are not all true, but not all false either." "What kind of stories?" "They say I am a killer," he replied simply. "They say I have no respect for the law or civilized society. They are not entirely wrong." Despite her vulnerability, Sarah felt no fear. This man had saved her life and asked nothing in return. I have nowhere else to go, she said quietly. Then you will stay, Ryan decided. Over the following weeks, Sarah learned the rhythms of Ryan's isolated life. He rose before dawn to check his trap lines, returning with rabbits and occasionally larger game. His garden was carefully planned and meticulously tended. Every aspect of his existence spoke of a man who had chosen solitude but refused to merely survive in it. Sarah made herself useful without being asked. She mended his clothes, cooked meals that were more elaborate than his simple fare, and helped tend the garden. Her presence seemed to soften something in Ryan that had been hard for too long. They spoke little during the day, but evenings by the fire brought longer conversations. Ryan had been educated back east before coming to the mountains 15 years earlier. He spoke of books and ideas with a passion that surprised her. Sarah found herself sharing stories of her childhood, her dreams, her fear that she would never be more than a burden. You are not a burden, Ryan said one evening. You have brought something to this place that I did not know was missing. What is that? Hope, he replied simply. As spring deepened into early summer, Sarah's strength returned completely. She could have continued her journey to Denver, but the thought held no appeal. Here in the mountains, she had found something resembling peace. The change in their relationship happened gradually. Conversations grew longer and more intimate. Accidental touches lingered. Sarah caught Ryan watching her with an expression that made her heart race. One evening in late June, as they sat watching the sunset, Sarah finally asked about his past. Ryan was quiet for so long that she thought he would not answer. I was married once, he said finally. Her name was Margaret. We lived in a town called Cedar Ridge. I was the sheriff. Sarah waited, sensing there was more. There was a man named Jeremiah Walsh who owned most of the businesses in town. He was cruel to his workers and cheated anyone who could not fight back. When people complained, the mayor told me to ignore it. Ryan's hands clenched into fists. Walsh took an interest in Margaret. When she refused his advances, he began making life difficult for us. The mayor made it clear that if I wanted to keep my position, I needed to convince my wife to be more accommodating. What happened? One night, Walsh and 3 of his men broke into our home while I was out on patrol. Ryan's voice had gone flat and cold. When I returned, I found them in our bedroom. Margaret was fighting them, but she was no match for 4 grown men. Ryan stood abruptly and walked to the edge of the porch. I killed all 4 of them. Margaret was alive, but barely. She died 3 days later from her injuries. The law came after you? The law was owned by Walsh's friends. They said I was a murderer who had killed 4 innocent men in a fit of jealous rage. Ryan turned back to face her. I ran before they could hang me. I have been running ever since. I am sorry, Sarah whispered. I swore I would never care about another person the way I cared about Margaret. It hurts too much when you lose them. But you saved me. That was different. You were dying. Sarah reached across the space between their chairs and took his hand. Ryan, you are a good man who did what anyone would do to protect the person they loved. No one else would see it that way. I see it that way, she replied. The next morning, Ryan was distant again, as if sharing his story had reminded him of reasons he should not allow their relationship to deepen. Sarah respected his need for space, but she also began to show him in small ways that she was not going anywhere. Slowly, Ryan's defenses began to crumble. One evening in July, as they worked together to preserve wild berries, their hands touched as they reached for the same jar. Instead of pulling away, Ryan let his fingers intertwine with hers. Sarah, he said quietly, I cannot promise you safety if you stay with me. Someday my past may catch up with us. Then we will face it together, Sarah replied. I love you, he said, as if the words were being torn from his soul. I love you too, Sarah whispered. That night they became lovers in truth. Ryan was gentle and reverent, treating Sarah's body like something precious. Afterward, as they lay entwined before the dying fire, Sarah felt a completeness she had never known. Through the summer months, Sarah and Ryan built a life together that felt like the answer to prayers neither had dared to voice. They worked side by side in the garden, preserved food for winter, and made improvements to the cabin. Ryan taught Sarah to shoot, to read the weather, to move silently through the forest. Sarah taught Ryan to hope again. But their greatest test came not from the wilderness, but from the world Ryan had left behind. It was late September when the riders appeared. Sarah was hanging laundry when she spotted them cresting the ridge. 5 men on horseback, moving with purposeful intent. Her blood turned to ice as she recognized the lead rider. Sheriff Timothy Brooks of Cedar Ridge had aged in the 15 years since Ryan's flight, but his cruel smile remained unchanged. The badge on his chest caught the afternoon sunlight like a warning. Sarah ran to the cabin where Ryan was repairing a chair leg. "Riders coming," she gasped. "5 of them. The leader has a badge." Ryan's face went pale, but his voice remained steady. "Go to the root cellar and stay there." "No," Sarah said firmly. "We face this together." They stepped onto the porch as the riders entered their yard. Sheriff Brooks sat his horse with casual arrogance. His deputies spread out in a loose semicircle, hands resting on their weapons. "Ryan Collins," Brooks called out, "you have led us quite a chase." "Timothy," Ryan replied carefully, "still wearing that badge, I see. Still cleaning up messes, like the one you left in Cedar Ridge 15 years ago." "I left no mess." "Otra vez," Ryan said. "I left 4 dead rapists and a corrupt sheriff who protected them." Brooks laughed coldly. "Is that the story you tell yourself? The witnesses said you came home to find your wife entertaining guests and flew into a murderous rage." "Lies," Sarah said, stepping forward despite Ryan's warning. Brooks turned his attention to Sarah for the first time. "And you must be the woman he has been hiding. Sarah Flores, widow of Aaron Morris. Did you know your lover is a wanted murderer? Did you know your badge belongs to a man who protects rapists?" Sarah shot back. Brooks's face darkened. "Careful, woman. Harboring a fugitive is a crime. So is adultery, for that matter." "Adultery?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "I am a widow. I can choose who I love. Can you?" Brooks smiled coldly. "Because according to my records, Aaron Morris is very much alive. Reports of his death were greatly exaggerated, which means you, my dear, are a married woman living in sin with a known killer." Sarah's world tilted. "That is impossible. I saw his body." "You buried someone," Brooks agreed, "but it was not your husband. Aaron Morris survived that mine collapse. He has been looking for his wayward wife ever since." Ryan stepped protectively in front of Sarah. "Even if that were true, Sarah is under my protection." "Your protection?" Brooks laughed. "You are under arrest for murder, and Mrs. Morris is under arrest for adultery and abandoning her lawful husband." "I will not go with you," Sarah said. "You will go," Brooks replied, "or you will hang." One of the deputies spoke up. "Sheriff, maybe we should just take Collins. Has not done anything wrong." Brooks turned on his subordinate. "She is living in adultery with a murderer. In my territory, that is enough to hang for." "You have no authority here," Ryan said quietly. "This is federal land. I have authority wherever I choose to exercise it. Now drop that rifle and come peacefully, or we will take you both by force." "You will have to take us by force, regardless," Ryan replied. "Wait," Sarah said suddenly. "If Aaron Morris is truly alive, I want to see him. Bring him here and let me hear from his own lips that he wants me back." Brooks smiled like a cat that had cornered a mouse. "Oh, he wants you back. He has been quite vocal about reclaiming his property." "Then bring him," Sarah repeated. "If I am truly his wife, let him come and claim me himself. Very well. We will return tomorrow with your husband, but understand that when we do, you will leave with us, and Collins will hang." That night, Sarah and Ryan held each other with desperate intensity. They made love with passion born of impending loss, every touch a promise they might not be able to keep. Afterward, they spoke in hushed tones of escape plans that both knew were impossible. "We could run," Sarah suggested. "Head north into Canada. They would follow us," Ryan replied. "Brooks has been hunting me for 15 years. Then we fight. And die here," Ryan finished. "Sarah, I will not let you throw your life away for me." "You would not be letting me do anything," Sarah replied. "It would be my choice. If Aaron Morris is truly alive, if you are legally his wife, then what we have here is built on sand. Maybe it would be better if you went with them." Sarah sat up abruptly, eyes flashing. "How can you say that? After everything we have shared, you would just let them take me?" "I would let you live," Ryan said quietly. "That matters more than my happiness." "And what about my happiness? What about what I want? What you want may not matter in the eyes of the law. Since when do you care what the law says?" They held each other until dawn, neither sleeping, both knowing that whatever happened would change everything. The riders returned at midday, and this time there were 6 of them. The additional man was thin and wasted, with the pale complexion of someone who had been seriously ill. Sarah recognized him immediately, though he looked like a shadow of the man she had married. Aaron Morris sat his horse unsteadily, his eyes fixed on Sarah with an expression that was part longing, part accusation. He had lost weight, and his left arm hung awkwardly, clearly damaged in whatever accident had nearly killed him. "Sarah," he said, his voice hoarse, "I have been looking for you for months." "Aaron," Sarah replied carefully, "I was told you were dead." "Nearly was," he admitted. "Took me a long time to heal. When I got back, the neighbors said you had run off, said you could not wait to be rid of me." "That is not true," Sarah said, though she knew it was not entirely false. "I grieved for you. I had nothing left." Aaron's eyes moved to Ryan. "And you found comfort with this murderer?" "I found kindness," Sarah replied. "I found someone who saved my life." "I am your husband," Aaron said. "You belong with me." Sheriff Brooks leaned forward. "Well, Mrs. Morris, are you ready to return to your lawful husband?" Sarah looked at Aaron, this man she had once promised to honor and obey. She saw the pain in his eyes, the genuine hurt. She also saw the weakness that had driven him to drink, the selfishness that had left her with nothing. Then she looked at Ryan, the man who had taught her what love could be. "Aaron," she said finally, "I am sorry you were hurt, but I cannot come with you." Aaron's face crumpled. "Sarah, please, I know I was not the best husband, but I can change." "No," Sarah said gently but firmly. "We cannot. I am not the same woman you married." "You are my wife," Aaron insisted, "in the eyes of God and the law." "In the eyes of God," Sarah replied, "I am with the man I love. If that is adultery, then I choose adultery over a loveless marriage." Brooks smiled coldly. "Then you choose the gallows. The penalty for adultery is death." "So be it," Sarah said, moving to stand beside Ryan. Brooks raised his hand and his deputies drew their weapons. "You are both under arrest. Surrender now or we will take you by force." Ryan raised his rifle and Sarah pulled her pistol. They stood together, facing impossible odds. "Wait," Aaron called out suddenly. He dismounted unsteadily and walked toward the porch. "Sarah, if you truly do not want to come with me, if you truly love this man more than you ever loved me, then I will not force you." "Aaron," Sheriff Brooks warned, "remember what we discussed." "I remember," Aaron replied, continuing toward Sarah. "I also remember that I loved you once. If you are happy here, then maybe that is enough. Are you happy, Sarah? Truly happy?" "Yes," Sarah whispered. Aaron nodded slowly. "Then I release you from your vows. In the eyes of God, I declare you free." Brooks's face turned purple. "You cannot do that, Morris. She is your property under the law." "She is not property," Aaron replied. "She is a person with her own heart, and her heart belongs here." "This is ridiculous," Brooks snarled. "Collins is still a murderer, and the woman is still an adulteress. They will both hang." "You heard the man," Ryan said. "He releases her from their marriage." "The law does not recognize such releases," Brooks replied. "Only a court can grant a divorce." "Then we will go to court," Sarah said suddenly. "We will face a judge and tell our story. You think any judge will side with a murderer and an adulteress?" "I think," said a new voice from the edge of the yard, "that depends on the judge." Everyone turned to see a lone rider approaching. The man was elderly, but sat his horse with authority. His clothes marked him as a person of importance, and the badge on his vest identified him as a federal marshal. "Marshal Joshua Jones," the newcomer announced, dismounting carefully. "I was tracking horse thieves when I heard voices. Seems I have stumbled into something more interesting." Sheriff Brooks straightened uncomfortably. "Marshal, this is a local matter. These people are wanted for crimes in my jurisdiction." "Are they now?" Marshal Jones walked closer. "And what crimes might those be?" "Murder and adultery," Brooks replied quickly. "The man is Ryan Collins, wanted for killing 4 men in Cedar Ridge 15 years ago." Marshal Jones looked at Ryan with interest. "Ryan Collins? I remember that case. You were the sheriff who killed Jeremiah Walsh and his associates." "I was," Ryan replied carefully. "Interesting," the marshal mused, "because I also remember the federal investigation that followed. Seems there were questions about the official version of events." "There was no federal investigation," Brooks protested. "Oh, but there was," Marshal Jones corrected. A quiet one. We found witnesses who told a very different story than the one in your reports, Sheriff Brooks. Brooks had gone pale. I do not know what you are talking about. I think you do. We found the doctor who treated Margaret Collins before she died. He told us about her injuries. We found the saloon girl who overheard Walsh planning their attack. We even found one of Walsh's men willing to talk. What did they tell you? Sarah asked. They told us that Ryan Collins was a good man who did exactly what any husband would do when he found four animals assaulting his wife. They told us that Jeremiah Walsh was a rapist and murderer protected by corrupt officials. Then why was Ryan never cleared? Because the federal government does not like to interfere in local matters unless necessary. We gathered evidence but waited for someone to ask us to act. No one ever did. I am asking now, Ryan said quietly. Marshal Jones smiled. I was hoping you would say that. Ryan Collins, by the authority vested in me by the United States government, I hereby declare that all charges against you are dropped. You acted in defense of your wife and home, and no crime was committed. Sheriff Brooks sputtered in outrage. You cannot do that. Those men were respected citizens. Those men were rapists and murderers, Marshal Jones replied coldly. And you were an accessory to their crimes. I have enough evidence to charge you as well. What about the adultery charge? Brooks demanded desperately. What about it? The marshal asked. The woman's husband has released her from their marriage vows. While not legally binding in civil court, it speaks to intent and consent. Aaron Morris stepped forward. Marshal, I want it on record that I do not wish to press charges against my former wife. She thought I was dead, and she has found happiness. I will not stand in the way. Marshal Jones nodded approvingly. A wise decision. He turned back to Brooks. So tell me, Sheriff, exactly what crimes do you believe have been committed here? Brooks opened and closed his mouth like a fish. Finally, they are living together without being married. So are half the couples on the frontier, the marshal replied dryly. Are you planning to arrest them all? This is outrageous, Brooks snarled. I will not be made a fool of. You are making a fool of yourself, Marshal Jones replied. I suggest you return to Cedar Ridge and consider whether you are truly fit to wear that badge. For a moment, it seemed Brooks might draw his weapon. But then one of his deputies spoke up. Sheriff, maybe we should go. We have ridden a long way for nothing. Brooks looked at his men and saw they were no longer with him. Slowly, his hand moved away from his weapon. This is not over, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Yes, it is, Marshal Jones replied firmly. It has been over for 15 years. Brooks wheeled his horse and spurred it toward the ridge. His deputies followed, maintaining distance from their superior. Aaron Morris lingered after the others had gone. He approached Sarah one last time. I am sorry, Sarah, for the drinking, for the debts, for not being the husband you deserved. You were not a bad man, Aaron. We were just not right for each other. Aaron nodded and turned to Ryan. Take care of her. She deserves to be happy. I will, Ryan promised. Aaron mounted his horse and rode away without looking back. Marshal Jones approached them with a smile. Well, that was more excitement than I expected. I suppose congratulations are in order. Thank you, Sarah said, tears of relief streaming down her face. I thought we were going to die today. Marshal, Ryan called as the older man prepared to mount. Why did you really come here today? Joshua Jones paused. Because I have been carrying a federal pardon with your name on it for the past 5 years, waiting for the right moment to deliver it. When I heard Brooks was finally making his move, I decided that moment had come. He swung into his saddle. Sometimes justice takes time, but it always arrives eventually. With that, he rode north, leaving Sarah and Ryan alone in their valley once more. In the weeks that followed, Sarah and Ryan worked to rebuild not just their life together, but their faith and happiness. The confrontation had resolved the legal questions, but emotional scars took longer to heal. As winter deepened, they settled into routines that felt like the foundation of a real marriage. They worked together, planned together, and dreamed together. It was during the darkest days of January that Sarah realized she was pregnant. The signs had been subtle at first. A missed monthly cycle, morning queasiness, unusual fatigue. But as the symptoms persisted, there could be no doubt. She told Ryan on a quiet evening as they sat by the fire, I am with child. Ryan's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. His face lit up with wonder and joy. Are you certain? As certain as I can be. The baby should come in late summer. A baby, Ryan murmured. Our baby. Are you happy? Happy? Ryan laughed, a sound of pure joy. Sarah, you have given me everything I thought I had lost forever. Of course I am happy. As winter gave way to spring, Sarah's pregnancy progressed normally. Ryan became almost comically protective, insisting she avoid any remotely dangerous task. They compromised on a division of labor that kept Sarah active but safe. It was during a peaceful gardening session in late April that they received unexpected visitors. Sarah was kneeling among the bean plants when she heard approaching horses. Her blood chilled, remembering the last time riders had appeared. But these were different men entirely. There were three of them, all young and clean-shaven, with the look of men who had never known real hardship. Their clothes marked them as city dwellers. The leader dismounted and approached with a confident smile. Good afternoon, he called cheerfully. I am looking for Ryan Collins. Ryan emerged from behind the cabin, axe still in his hands. I am Ryan Collins. The young man's smile widened. Excellent. My name is Robert Roberts, and I represent the Cedar Ridge Development Company. We have a proposition that will interest you greatly. Sarah felt familiar apprehension. What kind of proposition? Roberts gestured at the valley. This is beautiful land, perfect for development. My company is prepared to offer you a very generous sum for your property. This land is not for sale, Ryan replied immediately. Now, Roberts said, smile never wavering. Do not be hasty. We are prepared to pay you $5,000 for this entire valley. Sarah gasped despite herself. $5,000 was more money than most people saw in a lifetime. Not interested, Ryan said. Roberts' smile flickered. Perhaps you do not understand our plans. We intend to build a resort here, a place where wealthy people can experience mountain beauty and comfort. It will bring prosperity to the entire region. It will bring destruction, Ryan replied. This valley is home to wildlife that has lived here for thousands of years. We would preserve the natural beauty, Roberts assured him. That is the whole point. Sarah stepped forward. What you are talking about is not preservation. It is exploitation. You want to turn our home into a playground for rich people. Roberts turned to her with a patronizing smile. And you must be Mrs. Collins. I am sure you can appreciate financial security, especially with a child on the way. Sarah's hand moved protectively to her belly, and she saw Ryan's grip tighten on his axe. How did you know about the baby? Word travels fast, Roberts replied smoothly. The point is, you have a family to think about. $5,000 would ensure your child's future. Our child's future is here, Sarah said firmly. In this valley, learning to live in harmony with nature. Roberts' smile finally disappeared. I am afraid you do not understand the situation. The Cedar Ridge Development Company has already purchased the mineral rights to this valley from the territorial government. We have legal claim to everything beneath your land. Sarah felt the ground shift. Mineral rights? There are significant copper deposits in these mountains, Roberts explained, his voice taking on a harder edge. The territorial survey identified them last year. While you may own surface rights, the government has sold us everything underneath. Ryan's face had gone pale. That is impossible. I have established a homestead claim. A claim that was never properly filed, Roberts corrected. Because you were a fugitive, you could not legally file the paperwork. This land has remained in the public domain. Sarah felt sick, but we have federal recognition now. Marshall Jones cleared Ryan's name. That is true, Roberts acknowledged. You could file a homestead claim now, but it would take years to process, and meanwhile, we have the legal right to begin mining operations. Mining operations? Ryan's voice was deadly quiet. You mean to tear up this entire valley? Just the areas where copper deposits are heaviest. Unfortunately, that includes where your cabin sits. How long do we have? Our equipment arrives in 6 weeks. We would prefer to have this settled amicably before then. And if we refuse to sell, then we will exercise our legal rights to access the mineral deposits. Your cabin sits directly over the richest vein. It will have to be removed. This is our home, Sarah said through tears. Our baby will be born here. I understand your attachment, Roberts said, but sometimes progress requires sacrifice. The copper will help build railroads and telegraph lines that will benefit thousands. And what about the wildlife? The streams and forests? There will be some environmental impact, but the economic benefits outweigh the costs. To whom? Ryan asked. To you and your investors? Robert straightened, clearly tired of the discussion. I have made you a generous offer. $5,000 is more than most men see in a lifetime. You can buy land anywhere, build a new life. We do not want a new life somewhere else, Sarah said fiercely. That is not an option. The mining will proceed with or without your cooperation. The only question is whether you will be compensated. Ryan took a step forward, and Sarah saw the dangerous glint in his eyes. Mr. Roberts, I suggest you leave my property immediately. Your property? I think we have established this is not actually your property. Get out, Ryan said quietly. Now, something in his voice penetrated Roberts' arrogance. He looked at his companions and saw them tense. You are making a mistake, Collins, Roberts said as he backed toward his horse. We are offering you dignity and financial future. If you force legal action, you will end up with nothing. I would rather have nothing than sell my soul to men like you. Roberts mounted with angry movements. You have 1 week to reconsider. After that, the offer is withdrawn and you face the full legal consequences. The three men rode away at a gallop, leaving Sarah and Ryan standing in their gardens, surrounded by beauty they were about to lose. Sarah sank to her knees among the bean plants. Ryan knelt beside her. We will fight this. How? They have lawyers and money and the law. What do we have? We have the truth. And sometimes that is enough. That night, they lay awake discussing options. They could take the money and start over, but abandoning their home felt like betrayal. They could fight in court, but legal battles were expensive with no guarantee of success. Or they could stay and resist, knowing such resistance would likely end in violence. I will not let them destroy this place, Ryan said finally. This valley has been my salvation. It is where I found you, where we found each other. What are you saying? I am saying that some things are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. And what about our baby? Our future? Our baby deserves to be born in a world where people stand up for what is right, Ryan replied. If we give in, what kind of world are we leaving for our children? The next morning brought news that changed everything. Marshal Joshua Jones arrived as Sarah was hanging laundry, his face grim with purpose. I need to speak with you about the Cedar Ridge Development Company, he said without preamble. You know about their plans? Sarah asked hopefully. I know about a great deal more than their plans. I have been investigating this company for 6 months, and what I have discovered is very interesting indeed. Ryan emerged from the cabin. What brings you back, Marshal? Justice, Marshal Jones replied simply, and the law properly applied. He dismounted and approached them. The Cedar Ridge Development Company does not exist. What do you mean? I mean it is a fiction, a shell created by men trying to steal this land through fraudulent means. The real owners of the mining claims are Eastern investors who have never set foot in Colorado territory. But they showed us documents, Ryan protested. Forged documents. Very good forgeries, but forgeries nonetheless. The territorial government never sold minerals rights to this valley because this valley was never properly surveyed for mineral content. Sarah felt hope blooming. Then there is no copper here? Oh, there might be copper, but no one has the legal right to mine it without proper surveys, claims, and environmental assessments. The men who visited you are confidence artists trying to buy your land for a fraction of its value so they can resell it to legitimate mining interests. They tried to steal our home, Ryan said angrily. They have been trying to steal many homes. You are not their first victims, but you may be their last, if you are willing to help me stop them. What do you need us to do? Sarah asked immediately. I need you to play along with their scheme, Marshal Jones explained. When they return with their final offer, appear to consider it seriously. Tell them you need time to discuss it, that you want to see all their documentation. And then I will be waiting with a federal warrant for their arrest. Fraud, forgery, conspiracy to commit theft, and a dozen other charges that will put them away for a very long time. What about the real mining interests they represent? Ryan asked. If there actually is copper, will not someone else come with legitimate claims? That is possible, the marshal admitted, but legitimate mining operations have to follow federal regulations. They cannot simply tear up your land without compensation and environmental review. And if you file your homestead claim properly, which I can help you do, You will have legal standing to negotiate any future development. We can keep our home, Sarah asked. You can keep your home, Marshall Jones confirmed, and you can help ensure that other families do not fall victim to these same criminals. They spent the morning planning their strategy. When Roberts returned, Ryan and Sarah would express interest while asking detailed questions about documentation. The marshal would be hidden nearby, listening and gathering evidence. The plan worked perfectly. Roberts returned 3 days later with two different companions, both of whom looked more like hired gunmen than businessmen. All three wore sidearms and carried themselves with casual arrogance. Have you reconsidered our offer? Roberts asked without preamble. We have discussed it extensively, Ryan replied carefully. The money would certainly be useful, especially with a baby coming. Excellent, Roberts said, his smile returning. I knew you would see reason, but we have questions about the legal aspects, Sarah interjected. We would like to see the original mineral rights documents, the territorial survey reports, and any other paperwork that establishes your company's claim. Roberts' smile flickered. That is really not necessary. Our lawyers have reviewed everything thoroughly. I am sure they have, Ryan said, but we would feel more comfortable reviewing the documents ourselves before making such an important decision. The paperwork is back in Cedar Ridge, one of Robert's companions said. It would take days to retrieve it. Then we will wait, Sarah said pleasantly. After all, this is the most important decision we will ever make. We want to be absolutely certain we understand all the legal implications. Roberts' facade was beginning to crack. Time is a factor here, Collins. Our equipment is already en route. We need a decision today. Then I am afraid our answer is no, Ryan said calmly. We are not comfortable proceeding without reviewing the proper documentation. Robert's face darkened. That is a very unwise decision, Collins. Very unwise indeed. Are you threatening us? Sarah asked. I am simply pointing out the realities of the situation, Roberts replied coldly. With or without your cooperation, this land will be mined. The only question is whether you profit from the transaction or lose everything. Ryan stepped forward, his hand moving toward his rifle. I think you should leave now, Roberts. Roberts looked at his companions and seemed to reach some sort of decision. Very well, Collins. But do not say we did not warn you. The three men mounted their horses, but instead of riding away immediately, Roberts turned back to face them. You have until tomorrow morning to change your mind, he called out. After that, we will proceed with or without your consent. As soon as the riders disappeared over the ridge, Marshal Jones emerged from his hiding place behind the cabin. Did you hear all of that? Sarah asked. Every word, the marshal replied with grim satisfaction. Threats, intimidation, and clear evidence of fraud. I have more than enough to arrest them all. When will you make your move? Ryan asked. Tonight, the marshal replied. They will be camped somewhere nearby, probably planning their next move. I will track them down and take them into custody before they can cause any more trouble. Be careful, Sarah warned. They look like dangerous men. I have been dealing with dangerous men for 30 years, Marshal Jones replied with a slight smile. These particular criminals are about to discover that crime does not pay. The marshal rode out just before sunset, leaving Sarah and Ryan alone to wait for news of his success. They tried to maintain their normal evening routine, but both were too nervous to concentrate on anything for long. Sarah found herself jumping at every sound, while Ryan checked and rechecked his weapons. It was near midnight when they heard gunshots echoing through the mountains. 3 sharp cracks followed by a longer volley that seemed to go on forever. Then silence. Sarah gripped Ryan's hand tightly as they waited for some sign of what had happened. Had the marshal succeeded in arresting the criminals, or had the confrontation gone wrong? The minutes stretched into hours with no word. Finally, just before dawn, they heard the sound of approaching horses. Sarah's heart pounded as she tried to determine how many riders were coming and whether they were friend or foe. Ryan stood ready with his rifle, prepared to defend their home if necessary. Marshal Jones appeared first, riding slowly and carefully. Behind him, tied to their horses with their hands bound, rode Roberts and his 2 companions. All 3 prisoners looked battered and defeated, their earlier arrogance completely gone. It is over, the marshal called out as he approached the cabin. These men will not be troubling you or anyone else for a very long time. Sarah ran to greet him, relief flooding through her entire body. Are you hurt? Nothing that will not heal, the marshal replied, though Sarah could see blood on his sleeve and a cut on his forehead. They put up more of a fight than I expected, but the outcome was never really in doubt. What happens now? Ryan asked. Now they go to Denver to face federal charges, Marshall Jones replied. And you file your homestead claim properly so that no one can ever question your right to this land again. As the sun rose over their valley, Sarah and Ryan watched the marshal lead his prisoners away towards civilization and justice. For the first time in months, Sarah felt truly safe. Their home was secure, their future was bright, and their baby would be born in the place where love had conquered fear. But their greatest test still lay ahead. It was late July when Sarah went into labor. The baby was coming earlier than expected, and the midwife they had arranged was still days away. Ryan found himself facing the terrifying prospect of delivering their child alone. Sarah's labor was long and difficult. For 18 hours, she struggled with contractions that seemed to tear her apart. Ryan held her hand, bathed her forehead with cool water, and tried to project a calm he did not feel. As the sun set on the second day of Sarah's labor, Ryan began to fear that he was going to lose them both. Sarah was exhausted, barely conscious between contractions. The baby seemed to be in distress, and Ryan had no idea what to do to help. It was then that unexpected help arrived. The sound of approaching horses sent Ryan's heart racing. He could not leave Sarah's side, but he also could not defend them if hostile visitors had arrived at the worst possible moment. He called out a challenge, his voice hoarse with exhaustion and fear. Ryan Collins, a woman's voice replied. My name is Helen Price. Marshall Jones sent me. Relief flooded through Ryan as a middle-aged woman dismounted and hurried toward the cabin. She carried a medical bag and had the confident bearing of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. I'm a midwife, Helen explained as she entered the cabin and immediately began examining Sarah. The marshal thought you might need help, so he sent word to me. I rode as fast as I could. Thank God, Ryan whispered. Helen worked with swift efficiency, her experienced hands guiding Sarah through the final stages of labor. As the sun rose on the third day, their daughter finally entered the world with a lusty cry that brought tears of joy to both parents' eyes. She is perfect, Helen announced, placing the tiny squirming bundle in Sarah's arms. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a set of lungs that will serve her well in these mountains. Sarah looked down at their daughter with wonder and exhaustion. She has your eyes, she whispered to Ryan. And your stubborn streak, Ryan replied, gently stroking the baby's tiny hand. They named her Margaret, after Ryan's first wife, but they called her Maggie. She was a mountain baby from the start, sleeping peacefully through thunderstorms and seeming to thrive in the thin air that left visitors gasping. As autumn painted the mountains in brilliant gold and crimson, Sarah and Ryan settled into the rhythms of parenthood. Maggie was a good baby, content to sleep in the cradle Ryan had carved while her parents worked around the cabin. The experience of nearly losing Sarah during childbirth had changed Ryan in subtle but important ways. He became even more protective of his family, but also more appreciative of every ordinary moment they shared together. He would sit for hours watching Sarah nurse their daughter, marveling at the miracle of new life in their isolated valley. Sarah, meanwhile, discovered reserves of strength she had never known she possessed. The difficult birth had left her weak for several weeks, but as she recovered, she found herself more confident and capable than ever before. She was no longer the desperate widow who had stumbled into Ryan's valley begging for help. She was a mother, a partner, and a woman who had found her place in the world. Their first winter as a family was challenging but joyful. Maggie grew rapidly, her bright eyes taking in everything around her with obvious intelligence. She seemed to recognize her parents' voices and would calm instantly when Ryan sang the old ballads his own mother had taught him years earlier. It was during one of these quiet winter evenings that Sarah broached a subject that had been on her mind for months. Ryan, she said as she rocked Maggie to sleep by the fire, I have been thinking about our future. What about it? Ryan asked, looking up from the leather harness he was repairing. We cannot stay hidden in this valley forever, Sarah said carefully. Maggie will need schooling eventually. She will need to know about the world beyond these mountains. Ryan's face tightened. The world beyond these mountains tried to hang you for adultery, he reminded her. It tried to steal our land and destroy our home. Why would we want to expose our daughter to that? Because she deserves to have choices, Sarah replied. If she wants to stay here and live as we do, that should be her decision. But if she wants to go to school or travel or marry someone from outside the mountains, she should have that option too. Ryan was quiet for a long moment, considering her words. You are talking about leaving here. I'm talking about being ready to leave if necessary, Sarah corrected, and about making connections with the outside world so that we are not completely isolated. What kind of connections? Sarah had been thinking about this for weeks. There are other families in these mountains, other people who have chosen to live away from the settlements. We could form a community of sorts, help each other with education and trade and mutual protection. As if summoned by her words, they heard the sound of someone shouting outside the cabin. Ryan immediately grabbed his rifle and moved to the window, while Sarah clutched Maggie protectively to her chest. Help! A man's voice called through the wind. Please, I need help. Ryan peered through the frost-covered window and saw a lone figure stumbling through the snow toward their cabin. The man was clearly in distress, his movements unsteady and desperate. Stay back, Ryan warned Sarah as he moved toward the door. Wait, Sarah called. Look at him. He is hurt, not dangerous. Ryan looked more carefully and saw that Sarah was right. The stranger was clutching his left arm against his body, and there was blood on the snow behind him. Ryan opened the door and called out to the man. Over here! Can you make it to the porch? The stranger looked up with relief and stumbled the last few yards to the cabin. As he collapsed on their porch, Ryan could see that he was young, probably no more than 20, with the lean build of someone who spent his life outdoors. His left arm was clearly broken, and he had a gash on his forehead that was still bleeding. What happened to you? Ryan asked as he helped the young man into the cabin. Bear, the stranger gasped. Surprised a sow with cubs. She got me good before I managed to get away. Sarah immediately began gathering supplies to treat his injuries. Sit him by the fire, she instructed Ryan. We need to get him warm and see how badly he is hurt. As they worked to clean and bandage the young man's wounds, he told them his story. His name was Timothy Brooks, and he was the son of the corrupt sheriff who had tried to arrest them months earlier. But unlike his father, young Timothy had chosen to live an honest life in the mountains. I heard about what happened between you and my pa, Timothy said, as Sarah splinted his broken arm. I want you to know that I do not share his views. What he did to you was wrong, and I am ashamed to carry his name. You are not responsible for your father's actions, Ryan replied. But why are you telling us this? Because I want you to know that you can trust me, Timothy said simply. There are not many good people in these mountains. When you find them, you should hold on to them. Sarah and Ryan exchanged glances. This was exactly the kind of connection Sarah had been talking about, the beginning of a community based on mutual respect and shared values. You can stay here until your arm heals, Sarah offered. It is too dangerous for you to be alone in the wilderness with injuries like that. Timothy's face lit up with gratitude. Thank you. I do not know how to repay your kindness. No repayment necessary, Ryan said. We help each other in these mountains. That is how we survive. Over the following weeks, as Timothy's injuries healed, they discovered that Sarah's instincts had been correct. The young man was intelligent, hardworking, and completely trustworthy. He helped with chores around the cabin, shared his knowledge of the local wildlife, and proved to be excellent company during the long winter evenings. More importantly, Timothy knew other people in the mountains who shared their values. There was an elderly couple named Carol and Joshua who had homesteaded a valley 10 miles north. There was a young woman named Christina who ran a small trading post. There was even a former teacher named Julie who had started an informal school for the children of mountain families. By spring, Sarah and Ryan found themselves at the center of a loose but growing community of mountain dwellers who had chosen independence over conformity. They shared resources, information, and mutual protection. Their children played together and learned from multiple teachers. It was exactly what Sarah had envisioned, and it gave her hope for Maggie's future. Their daughter would grow up knowing that she had choices, that there were people in the world who valued freedom and independence. The trouble began in late spring when reports reached them of a new territorial governor who was determined to bring law and order to the mountains. Governor William Harrison had been appointed by the federal government with a mandate to eliminate the lawlessness that supposedly plagued the remote regions of Colorado Territory. According to the reports that filtered up from the settlements, Governor Harrison viewed the mountain communities as havens for criminals and fugitives. He had convinced the territorial legislature to pass new laws requiring all residents to register with local authorities and submit to regular inspections. The new laws were clearly designed to force the mountain dwellers back into the settlements where they could be more easily controlled. Anyone who refused to comply would be considered an outlaw and subject to arrest. Sarah felt a familiar chill of fear as she listened to Timothy describe the new regulations. It was happening again. Just as they had built something beautiful and sustainable, the outside world was trying to destroy it. We could comply with the new laws, suggested Carol, the elderly woman who had become something of a grandmother figure to their community. Comply how? Asked Christina, the young woman who ran the trading post. Move back to the settlements and give up everything we have built here? There might be a middle ground, offered Julie, the former teacher. Perhaps we could establish our own settlement with proper legal recognition. Ryan shook his head. You are missing the point. These laws are not about bringing order to the mountains. They are about control. Governor Harrison wants to eliminate any form of independent living that challenges the authority of the territorial government. So what do you suggest? Asked Joshua, Carol's husband. I suggest we ignore the new laws and continue living as we always have, Ryan replied. If they want to arrest us, let them try. And if they come with an army, Timothy asked quietly, then we will face them as we have faced every other threat, Ryan said firmly. Together. Sarah listened to the debate with growing unease. She understood Ryan's reluctance to submit to unjust authority, but she also feared the consequences of open defiance. They had Maggie to think about now and the other children in their community. The debate continued for hours without resolution. Some members of their community favored compliance, others supported resistance, and still others wanted to flee deeper into the wilderness. It was Sarah who finally proposed a solution that everyone could accept. We sent a delegation to meet with Governor Harrison, she suggested. We explain who we are and what we have built here. We show him that we are not criminals or fugitives, but law-abiding citizens who have chosen to live independently. And if he refuses to listen, asked Christina, then we will know where we stand, Sarah replied. But at least we will have tried to resolve this peacefully. The delegation consisted of Sarah, Ryan, Julie, and Timothy. They represented the diversity of their community and could speak to the governor about their experiences, their values, and their contributions to the territory. The journey to the territorial capital took 3 days, and Sarah spent much of the time wondering if they were making a terrible mistake. Governor Harrison had the power to arrest them all on the spot if he chose to view their visit as an act of defiance. Governor Harrison received them in his office in Denver, an imposing room designed to intimidate visitors with its displays of territorial authority. The governor himself was a small, neat man with cold eyes and a politician's smile. He listened to their presentation with apparent attention, asking occasional questions about their communities and their way of life. When they finished, Harrison leaned back in his chair and studied them for a long moment. You present an interesting case, he said finally. You claim to be law-abiding citizens, yet you live outside the reach of legal authority. You claim to contribute to the territory, yet you pay no taxes and follow no regulations. We follow the moral law, Julie replied. We harm no one, we steal from no one, we help those in need. The moral law is not sufficient in a civilized society, Harrison replied coldly. Without legal structure and governmental authority, there can be no true order, no real justice. What justice? Sarah asked, her temper finally getting the better of her diplomatic intentions. The justice that protected Jeremiah Walsh while he raped and murdered? The justice that would have hanged me for adultery while ignoring the corruption of Sheriff Brooks? Harrison's eyes narrowed. You speak of isolated incidents. The law is not perfect, but it is better than the alternative. What alternative? Ryan asked. Communities where people help each other instead of exploiting each other, where children learn from multiple teachers instead of being forced into rigid conformity. Anarchy, Harrison replied simply. What you describe is anarchy, and anarchy always leads to chaos and violence. Timothy spoke up for the first time. Governor, I have lived in both worlds. I grew up in a settlement where my father was the sheriff, and I have seen how legal authority can be corrupted and misused. I now live in a mountain community where people govern themselves through mutual respect and shared responsibility. I can tell you without hesitation which system produces more justice and more happiness. Harrison stood up, signaling that the meeting was over. I appreciate your perspective, young man, but I have a responsibility to the entire territory, not just to those who choose to live outside the law. The new regulations will be enforced, and those who refuse to comply will face the consequences. What consequences? Sarah asked. Arrest, trial, and imprisonment for those who resist lawful authority, Harrison replied. Confiscation of property for those who refuse to pay taxes. Removal of children from homes deemed unsuitable by territorial standards. Sarah felt sick. You would break up families? I would protect children from the harmful effects of lawlessness and ignorance, Harrison corrected. The delegation rode back to the mountains in grim silence. They had hoped for understanding, even compromise, but instead they had received an ultimatum. Submit to territorial authority or face the full force of the law. When they reported back to their community, the reaction was swift and unanimous. They would not submit. They would not abandon their homes, their way of life, or their children's future for the sake of a governor's political ambitions. But they also knew that their decision meant war. The territorial forces arrived in late summer, just as Maggie was taking her first tentative steps around the cabin. Sarah watched her daughter explore the world with wide-eyed wonder, and her heart broke at the thought that this innocent child might soon be caught in the middle of a violent conflict. Governor Harrison had sent a full company of territorial militia, 50 men armed with modern rifles and backed by the authority of the territorial government. Their leader was Major David Sterling, a career military officer who had spent his adult life following orders and expecting others to do the same. The militia made their camp at the mouth of the main valley that led to the mountain communities. It was a strategic position that allowed them to control access to the outside world while preparing for their assault on the settlements. Major Sterling's first act was to send a messenger to each community with a final ultimatum: submit to territorial authority within 24 hours or face military action. The response from the mountain dwellers was swift and clear. They would defend their homes and their way of life against any aggressor, whether criminal or governmental. Sarah spent the last night before the battle holding Maggie close, memorizing every detail of her daughter's face. Ryan sat beside them, his rifle across his knees, his eyes fixed on the distant glow of the militia's campfires. I am not afraid to die, Sarah said quietly. But I am afraid of what will happen to Maggie if we both fall. We will not both fall, Ryan replied with more confidence than he felt. And even if we do, there are others who will care for her. She will not be alone. The attack came at dawn, just as Sarah was nursing Maggie in the pre-dawn darkness. The sound of gunfire echoed through the valley, followed by shouts and screams as the militia overran the first defensive positions. Ryan kissed Sarah and Maggie goodbye and ran to join the other defenders. Sarah watched him go with tears in her eyes, knowing that she might never see him alive again. The battle raged for hours. The mountain dwellers fought with the desperation of people defending their homes and families, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. One by one, their defensive positions fell to the superior firepower of the territorial militia. Sarah crouched in the cabin with Maggie, listening to the sounds of battle growing closer. She had her pistol ready, determined to defend her daughter to the last breath. But she also knew that if the militia reached the cabin, their fight would be over. It was near noon when the shooting finally stopped. Sarah waited in terrified silence, straining to hear some sign of what had happened. Had the defenders won? Had they been defeated? Were Ryan and the others still alive? The answer came in the form of footsteps on the cabin's porch. Sarah raised her pistol, prepared to make her final stand, but the voice that called out was familiar and beloved. Sarah, it is over. We won. Ryan appeared in the doorway, battered and bloody but alive. Behind him came Timothy, Julie, and several other members of their community. They looked exhausted but victorious. How? Sarah asked, hardly daring to believe it. Major Sterling was not the monster we expected, Ryan explained, as he took Maggie in his arms and held her close. When he saw what we had built here, when he met our families and saw our children, he began to question his orders. The major had been a career soldier, but he was also a father. When he saw mountain children playing in gardens their parents had planted, when he met families who had built prosperous lives through hard work and cooperation, He realized that Governor Harrison had lied to him about the nature of the mountain communities. The final turning point came when several of Sterling's own soldiers refused to fire on the defenders. They had signed up to fight criminals and outlaws, not to destroy peaceful communities and break up families. Major Sterling called a ceasefire and requested a meeting with the community leaders. In that meeting, he learned the truth about their way of life, their values, and their contributions to the territory. He has agreed to report back to Governor Harrison that the mountain communities pose no threat to territorial authority. Ryan continued, he will recommend that we be allowed to continue governing ourselves as long as we agree to pay a modest tax and allow periodic inspections to ensure we are not harboring actual criminals. It was not everything they had hoped for, but it was enough. They would keep their homes, their families, and their freedom. Their children would grow up in the mountains they loved, with the knowledge that sometimes courage and principle could triumph over power and prejudice. As the sun set over their valley that evening, Sarah and Ryan sat on their porch with Maggie between them, watching the last of the territorial militia disappear over the ridge. They had faced every challenge the world could throw at them and emerged stronger for the struggle. Sarah looked at her husband, this man who had saved her from starvation and despair, who had taught her that love was worth fighting for. She looked at their daughter, this perfect child who represented their hope for the future. She looked at their valley, this place where they had built something beautiful and lasting against all odds. If she had sinned by choosing love over law, by choosing happiness over convention, by choosing freedom over security, then she would gladly sin again. Some things were worth any price, any risk, any sacrifice. And as the mountain stars appeared in the darkening sky, Sarah Flores Collins knew that she had found her place in the world at last. Here in this valley with this man raising this child, she had everything she had ever dreamed of, and more than she had ever dared to hope for. The rope that had once threatened to end her life had become the thread that bound her to everything worth living for, and she would never let it go.